Mr Chair.
I call
Mr Chair.
Honourable Heather Roy.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and I rise to speak to some of the concerns that the previous member had. The Clause 9 that we're debating is about transitional provision, as we've heard from a number of members, and one of the reasons that it's in place is because the member who just sat down, MP Gareth Hughes, implored the committee, and I was on the committee at this stage, that this would be a good idea. He wanted a transition for those summer students who had enrolled in summer school in December and would carry on over, because he didn't feel it would be fair that they had two sorts of fees to try and contend with. In fact, he felt it wouldn't be fair to the student associations involved, and so he had general agreement from all of the committee that that in fact was the fair and reasonable thing to do. And so to stand in this House tonight and try and pretend that this was a confusing mess, as he called it, I'd like him to stand and take some responsibility for this confusing mess, that we have before us. It's not a confusing mess at all. This provision, these transitional provisions, actually put fairness at the feet of the students' associations to cover that summer school period. Once upon a time, of course, when legislation was originally written, summer school didn't exist, and so this provision would not have been required. Many students now, for convenience, do require summer school. It helps them get through their courses much more quickly and is a very sensible provision. So I hope that the House now understands exactly why we have this transitional provision, and I fully support it, as did Mr Hughes at Select Committee, but sadly not tonight. Now, one or two other things that do need to be addressed, issues that have been raised as part of the debate on this particular clause, were the member Louise Upston's comments from the female student that she received. Many of us received emails from students that weren't actually sent from them, sent by them. There were at least 100, and I can tell the members exactly why. There were at least 100 sent by the Labour Party machine. The Labour Party machine, Save Our Services, took. And the reason I know this is because they sent an email of apology to the Honourable Peter Dunn, who has given his permission for this apology to be talked about in Parliament tonight. So those of you who think this isn't correct, speak to the Honourable Peter Dunn, and you can ask your friends at Save Our Services. I beg your pardon, can save the Labour Party's friends at Save Our Services as to why exactly the students' email addresses were used for anti-VSM emails to be sent to a number of MPs in this House. And I think actually we all deserved an apology, but most of all the students involved, the students whose identities were stolen, deserve an apology from Save Our Services and from these MPs who seem to think that this was such a good idea. And the last thing I'd like to address that has been raised as part of this, in fact, were the member Pete Hodgson's the leave that he tried to seek to table some of the admissions. And actually, I wouldn't have been in great objection to one of those being put forward. Ben Nettleton, in fact, gave a very good pro-VSM submission. And so it would be great to have that on the table. And I'm not sure why he just stuck to the Bens, but he did. And Ben Nettleton's submission was an absolutely superb submission, saying why we need VSM. Mr Chair, I look forward to the swift passing of this legislation. I'm delighted that we're finally debating it again today. And just my final point, Gareth Hughes said that we only have 4 months left. The people on this side of the House need to take responsibility for that, for filibustering this bill from the 8th of December last year.
I call the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr. Chairman, the first point I'd like to make